If she keeps insulting him, the club membership list will lose its most crucial name by dawn. Leo, the head concierge, whispered into his earpiece, the silver tray vibrating slightly in his hand. The crystal chandelier above the Grand Azure Club foyer caught the harsh glare of the ongoing confrontation. Chloe, 30s, sharp, dressed in six figures, had physically blocked the path of Elijah, 40s, quiet, wearing a simple tailored suit that looked suspiciously off the rack. Chloe's voice sliced through the exclusive quiet. "You don't belong in this club. Get security here now." Elijah simply adjusted his cuff, his eyes holding a depth of quiet power Chloe completely failed to register. This wasn't just an argument about dress code. This was a collision of realities, and only Leo knew who was about to shatter. Chloe Sinclair ran her life with the precision of a Swiss watch and the ruthlessness of a private equity fund. Every movement was calculated, every exposure curated. Her current habitat was the penthouse office of Sinclair Global Acquisitions, 50 floors above Manhattan. A space of glass and cool marble designed to project dominance. The morning started not with coffee, but with a rapid-fire conference call dismantling a small competitor who dared to underbid her latest tech acquisition. Her voice, smooth yet edged with titanium, delivered surgical strikes against the hapless CEO on the other end. "The merger is not delayed, Mr. Peterson. It is restructured. You will accept the revised valuation by noon, or the board will find you redundant by sunset," she concluded, hanging up without waiting for a reply. Power was not something she earned. It was the air she breathed. Her public image, the titaness of tech finance, was flawless, built on a foundation of relentless work, aggressive networking, and an inheritance she meticulously leveraged into a fortune far exceeding her father's. Yet, as she turned from the panoramic window, the massive desk felt sterile, the silence oppressive. She walked to a small hidden wall safe, opening it not for documents, but for a single worn photograph. It showed a slightly younger Chloe, mid-20s, laughing genuinely, pressed close to a man with kind eyes and a crooked smile, her late fiancé, Robert. Robert, who hadn't cared about market capitalization or quarterly reports. Robert, who had tragically lost his life 3 years ago in a seemingly random accident in the Hamptons. The guilt was a deep, constant ache. She often wondered if her obsessive focus on building an empire, her constant need to prove her worth to a world that suddenly felt hollow, was simply a desperate attempt to outrun the silence Robert left behind. She pushed the photograph back, her expression hardening instantly. The world saw a pillar of strength. She knew she was a monument built over a grave. That emotional void fueled her belief that success justified any action, any harsh word, or any quick judgment of those she deemed beneath her. Like the man she had just publicly humiliated at the club, authority was her shield against vulnerability. She picked up the next file, the confrontation already dismissed as a trivial security matter. Elijah Thorne didn't own skyscrapers. He serviced them. He spent his days in the quiet, climate-controlled chaos of server rooms and data banks, a specialist in cybersecurity and complex network architecture. His suit, which Chloe had mistaken for cheap, was actually highly tailored for movement and equipped with specialized hidden pockets for diagnostic gear. He moved through the city like a ghost, essential but unseen, the definition of social invisibility. His current contract had brought him to the physical infrastructure of the Grand Azure Club, a place he wouldn't normally set foot in, not even for its famed vintage scotch. The physical strain of his work was evident in the deep lines around his eyes and the slight tremor in his hands from too much caffeine and too many late nights spent tracing digital footprints. He was tired, but the exhaustion was secondary to his mission. Elijah wasn't just protecting data, he was protecting Lila, 8, his niece, who lived with him in a modest Brooklyn apartment after her parents, his brother and sister-in-law, had been forced into a prolonged medical treatment overseas due to a rare illness. Every successful contract meant another year of stable funding for Lila's specialized school and the relentless medical bills. He carried a profound, quiet burden. He knew too much about the unseen infrastructure of the elite. His current task was a deep audit of the club's security logs, prompted by a vague, alarming request from an anonymous source regarding unusual access patterns over the last few months. As he scanned encrypted files in a back-office cubicle, surrounded by the discarded luxury of the members, he kept replaying the image of Chloe Sinclair's face, contorted with arrogance. He hadn't fought back during the confrontation because he couldn't afford a scene. His work required silence. But the real weight wasn't the insult. It was a digital anomaly he had stumbled upon late last night, buried deep in a defunct subsidiary's records, a pattern of enormous, untraceable transactions linked by a unique encryption signature. That signature felt intimately connected to the very core of the club's network and, unsettlingly, bore the same complex fingerprint he had been hired to investigate. He knew something was terribly wrong, something that went far beyond misplaced arrogance and dress codes, involving figures far more powerful than Chloe. He just hadn't grasped the complete structure of the darkness yet. Before we dive deeper into Elijah's dangerous discovery, let me know, where are you watching this story unfold from tonight? Days after the embarrassing incident at the foyer, Chloe found herself involuntarily thinking about the quiet man. It wasn't remorse, but annoyance. He was an imperfection in her perfect landscape. She had instructed Leo, the concierge, to send a discreet, though sizable, donation to a charity in the man's name. A sterile transaction to clear her conscience. She didn't want to be the kind of person who ruined an employee's day, even if she felt justified in her snap judgment. That same afternoon, she was reviewing the due diligence report for her flagship acquisition, the massive data firm, Omnicron Systems. The merger was crucial, solidifying her status as a global player. She scanned the executive summary, looking for potential risks, but the financial data was impeccable. Yet, something in the security section snagged her attention. A single, dry line of text. External security audit required due to previously unidentified network architectural anomalies. Consulting firm, Sentinel Logic, retained. Chloe frowned. Sentinel Logic. Why hadn't her team flagged that? She pulled up the subcontractor details. The lead consultant assigned to the audit, E. Thorne, Elijah Thorne. Meanwhile, Elijah was 2 blocks away, immersed in the digital blueprints of Omnicron Systems. He wasn't focused on its future valuation, but its hidden history. The architectural anomalies were far worse than reported. They were carefully masked backdoors. A sophisticated parallel system designed to siphon data and funds undetected. It was a masterpiece of digital deception, and the encryption signature he'd seen at the Grand Azure Club was identical to the one securing the Omnicron Black network. The pieces started clicking into place with a terrifying momentum. The club wasn't just a social hub, it was a node, possibly the physical base of operations for this vast shadow network. And Omnicron Systems, the jewel in Chloe Sinclair's crown, was the target, or perhaps the primary vehicle, for the illicit activities. Elijah understood the gravity. If he exposed the network, he wouldn't just be exposing a few crooked executives. He would be unraveling something deeply entrenched in the city's highest echelons, people who considered themselves untouchable. He had seen Chloe's face during the incident, the raw entitlement, and he suddenly recognized the danger. She was either deeply involved in this operation, or she was about to buy the biggest liability of her life. He needed to find an unassailable proof before his identity, connected to the club's security logs, was discovered. The gap between the visible world of billion-dollar deals and the hidden world of digital crime was narrowing, pulling both the high-flying CEO and the invisible technician toward a catastrophic collision. Elijah spent the next 72 hours operating on pure adrenaline, split between the official Omnicron security review and his own clandestine investigation into the club's hidden network. The official data showed Omnicron was clean. His unauthorized deep dives showed sophisticated corruption. He realized the architects of this system were feeding the auditing firms exactly what they wanted to see. The depth of the deception was breathtaking, designed to withstand intense scrutiny, exactly the kind of scrutiny Chloe Sinclair would apply. The sign that everyone else missed was physical, not digital. Elijah returned to the Grand Azure Club's basement server room late one night, supposedly for a final diagnostic. He noticed that the fiber optic trunk lines, massive cables carrying all the club's data, were not routed correctly, according to the club's official schematics. One specific older trunk line was physically isolated and ran straight to a secure private wine cellar, a space Chloe herself had been planning to repurpose after the merger. This physical incoherence struck Elijah like a hammer blow. Why route high-capacity data through a refrigerated room accessible only by high-level members? It wasn't just a backup. It was a physical conduit designed for high-volume, covert transfers, bypassing all standard security checkpoints. The discovery plunged Elijah into a searing conflict. He could finish the Omicron audit, declare it clean as the official data demanded, take his substantial fee, and disappear with Lila. That was the safe path, the one that guaranteed his niece's future. The other path meant exposing the truth, which would instantly place a target on his back from the very forces that had orchestrated this network, forces that clearly operated above the law. He remembered Chloe's casual cruelty, the way she could dismiss a person's existence. These criminals, he knew, would dismiss a person's life just as easily. Fear gnawed at him, fear for Lila. If he became public, the safe life he was building for her would vanish. Yet, the moral decay he witnessed was too vast, too deeply rooted. If this network swallowed Omicron, Chloe would lose everything, and hundreds of innocent employees would pay the price for the financial collapse that would follow. More importantly, he suspected the money being laundered wasn't just corporate funds. The irregular transaction patterns suggested something far darker, possibly human trafficking or funding for illicit organizations. He could not, in good conscience, ignore the wine cellar conduit. He knew the moment he accessed that physical line, the clock would start ticking on his own safety. He took a deep breath, pulled a small, custom-made tap device from a concealed pocket, and approached the isolated cable. The temperature in the wine cellar felt arctic, matching the knot of dread in Elijah's stomach. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the climate control unit and the faint rhythmic pulse of data rushing through the hidden line. With precise, practiced movements, Elijah surgically spliced his tapping device onto the isolated fiber. He wasn't stealing data, he was duplicating it, routing a secured stream directly to an encrypted cloud server he controlled, operating on a low-frequency pulse designed to be undetectable by standard network monitoring tools. As the data began to pour in, a single alarm blipped on his specialized monitor. Not a network alert, but a physical sensor warning. Someone was accessing the wine cellar's main security panel. He had minutes, maybe less. He ignored the rising panic and focused on the first tranche of files. The information wasn't about accounting fraud. It was a comprehensive, heavily encrypted database of the network's true beneficiaries and their illicit operations. The names were a horrifying list of prominent figures, politicians, judges, and shockingly key figures within Chloe Sinclair's own corporation, all tied together by the Omicron acquisition. The data confirmed his worst fear. This wasn't just corporate espionage. It was a deeply organized criminal enterprise using the acquisition as a final, massive clearinghouse. Before he could pull the device, the heavy steel door to the cellar swung open. Standing there was Marcus, 50s, the head of Omicron's internal security, a man who had smiled blandly during their earlier meetings. Marcus wasn't alone. Two larger men loomed behind him. Marcus's polite facade melted away, replaced by an expression of cold, predatory efficiency. "Mr. Thorne, we were wondering when curiosity would kill the consultant," he said, his voice dangerously low. "That device is proprietary. Hand it over." Elijah knew he couldn't fight them, nor could he afford to lose the data. His training took over. He reached into his jacket, not for a weapon, but for a micro-drive disguised as a cufflink. With a swift, deliberate movement, he manually initiated the complete data transfer from the tap device to the cufflink, a process that would take exactly 7 seconds. "I just came to check the temperature calibration," Elijah said, feigning confusion, buying time. Marcus didn't wait. He signaled his men. As they lunged, Elijah smashed the tapping device against a wine rack. It sparked and died. He was tackled to the floor, the two security men applying brutal pressure. But the cufflink was safe, nestled inside his palm. He had lost the device, but he had secured the proof. The silence in the cellar was now suffocating, punctuated by the grunts of the struggle, and Marcus's furious realization that the data was gone. Elijah's life was now measured in the time it took for them to search him, but the core of the truth, compressed and encrypted, was his. Chloe Sinclair was in the middle of a celebratory board meeting finalizing the Omicron deal when her secure line buzzed with an urgent priority call. It was Marcus, Omicron's security chief, his voice strained and tight. "Chloe, we have a serious breach. The external consultant, Thorne. He accessed the auxiliary line in the club's cellar. He was tapping it." Chloe's blood ran cold. The auxiliary line. Her father had always referred to that line with a cryptic seriousness, saying it was for truly private negotiations. She had always assumed it was a tax evasion mechanism, nothing more. But the sheer panic in Marcus's voice was genuine. "What did he take?" Chloe demanded, instantly dismissing the board and sealing the room. "We destroyed his equipment, but he may have transferred data to an external drive. I've initiated a digital lockdown, but this goes deeper than I expected. The data he accessed, it connects the club's high-level accounts with the Omicron financial architecture. It implicates almost everyone," Marcus stammered, his composure cracking. "If that data goes public, Sinclair Global is finished, and I strongly suggest you find Thorne before he finds a journalist or a regulator." The room spun. Chloe wasn't just acquiring a company. She was about to inherit the nexus of organized crime. The arrogance she had worn like armor disintegrated, revealing pure, raw terror. Her judgment of Elijah Thorne, her casual dismissal of him, suddenly looked like catastrophic blindness. The tailored suit she scorned wasn't a sign of cheapness. It was a disguise. He wasn't a threat to her ego. He was the only thing standing between her and a life sentence, or worse, the lethal silence of those Marcus was now protecting. She pulled up the file on E. Thorne, reviewing his background again. Cybersecurity specialist, former military intelligence, sole guardian of a young niece. He wasn't a rogue agent, he was a silent protector, and he was now missing. Her internal conflict was brutal. She could still bury this, use her considerable resources to silence Marcus and erase the evidence, preserving her empire at all costs. But the fear of the truth, the memory of Robert, and the vague, unsettling details surrounding his accident suddenly resonated with the sheer scope of the corruption Marcus described. What if this network was connected to Robert's death? What if her father's private negotiations had cost her everything long ago? The urgency became personal. She activated her deepest confidential asset, a former NSA operative she kept on retainer, not to find Elijah and silence him, but to find him first. She had to know what was in that data, and she had to decide whether to protect her name or save her soul. The merger was irrelevant. Survival was the only metric left. The confrontation occurred not in a boardroom, but in a dimly lit, abandoned train yard deep in Queens, a location chosen by Elijah's tracking system as the only place secure enough for a high-risk meeting. Chloe arrived alone, having evaded Marcus's surveillance and using her own operatives to verify the location was clean. Elijah was waiting next to a silent, rusting locomotive, the microdrive still warm in his hand. Chloe approached, her expensive clothes incongruous against the grime. Her usual air of imperial authority was replaced by a taut urgency. "The merger is dead, Mr. Thorne. I know what Omicron is. Marcus told me what you took. What do you want?" Elijah looked at her, seeing beyond the arrogance now, sensing the brittle shell of a desperate woman. "I don't want money, Ms. Sinclair. I want the truth to stop. I want this network dismantled before it kills someone else. I want to protect my niece." He held up the cufflink. "This contains proof of a criminal syndicate operating under the veil of the Grand Azure Club, laundering billions. It includes the identities of the facilitators, the beneficiaries, and their methods of neutralizing threats. It also explains what happened to your fiancé, Robert." The last sentence was a clean shot through the armor. Chloe froze, her breath catching in a gasp that sounded like a sob. "Robert, what are you saying?" Elijah spoke quickly, clinically, but with genuine empathy. Robert stumbled onto the early stages of this operation through his investment firm. He wasn't random, he was a liability. The accident wasn't an accident, it was an engineered silence. The data proves they took his life because he was asking the wrong questions about the auxiliary line your father set up. The lie that had sustained Chloe for 3 years, the comforting, tragic narrative of a random loss, shattered. Her empire, her focus, her very identity, was built on a crime she was unknowingly preparing to fund. Tears streamed down her face, tears of fury and overwhelming grief. "My father. He knew," she whispered, the powerful CEO reduced to a wounded child. "He created the system, Miss Sinclair. He put the money first. The question now is, what do you put first? The power he left you or the justice Robert deserved?" Elijah challenged, the accusation simple and devastating. He extended the cufflink. "The key is an encryption I built. You have the access codes for the club's main servers. We use those to upload this data simultaneously to federal authorities and a secure journalistic outlet. If we don't work together, they will find both of us." Chloe stared at the small drive, then at the man she had called trash. Her choice was immediate and final. Destroy the legacy or honor the memory. She took the cufflink, the small piece of metal feeling heavier than any asset she had ever acquired. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic, an earthquake ripping through the foundations of New York's financial and social elite. 2 hours after Chloe and Elijah executed the simultaneous data drop, the FBI swarmed the Grand Azure Club, sealing the wine cellar and the server rooms. News channels ran continuous coverage of the unprecedented scandal. Chloe Sinclair's public fall was meteoric. She held an emergency press conference, not to deny but to confirm the systemic corruption, providing enough detail to ensure the investigation could not be derailed. She disclosed everything: the hidden network, the scope of the money laundering, and, most damningly, the role of her late father in establishing the infrastructure. The revelation of Robert's orchestrated death added a heartbreaking human element to the cold data. The consequences for her were brutal. Sinclair Global Acquisitions was placed under immediate federal investigation. While Chloe was cleared of direct criminal involvement, the firm's reputation was destroyed, its assets frozen. She lost her board, her penthouse office, and her public identity. The power she craved vanished overnight, leaving her isolated in the echoing emptiness of her own decisions. The price of truth was the destruction of her life as she knew it. For Elijah, the cost was different. Marcus and his associates were apprehended, but the lingering threat from the network's highest echelons remained. He and Lila had to enter a temporary protection program. He lost his home, his independent consulting identity, and the stability he had fought so hard to build. He traded financial security for moral clarity. The fear was still present, a low-grade hum, but it was cleaner now, the fear of a known enemy, not a hidden one. The justice was swift for some, slow and grinding for others. Numerous arrests were made, but the true deep-pocketed beneficiaries managed to delay proceedings. Yet, the exposure itself was a form of justice. The Grand Azure Club, once a fortress of privilege, was shuttered, its marble floors now marked with evidence tape, a permanent monument to the silent injustice that had festered beneath the surface of the city. Chloe and Elijah had broken the system, but both were left with profound, unhealable scars from the fight. 6 months later, the dust had settled into a quiet, profound transformation. Chloe Sinclair was no longer the titaness of tech finance. She had liquidated her remaining personal assets, establishing a foundation dedicated to exposing financial corruption and protecting whistleblowers. She worked from a small sun-drenched office downtown, the view replaced by stacks of legal documents and case files. Her expensive suits were gone, replaced by simple, practical attire. The emptiness she had felt after Robert's death was finally beginning to fill, not with power, but with purpose. Her dignity was restored, not by her name, but by her actions. She was truly fighting for Robert now. Elijah and Lila were safely settled in a quiet suburb outside Seattle, under new identities provided by the federal program. The initial terror had faded, replaced by the simple, precious routine of normalcy. Lila was thriving in her new school, painting elaborate, colorful scenes that filled their small apartment with light. Elijah no longer consulted for billion-dollar firms. He used his expertise to volunteer with non-profits, helping smaller organizations fortify their defenses against corporate espionage, his skills quietly restoring order to the marginalized. One afternoon, a small, discreet package arrived for Elijah. Inside, there was no note, just a small, high-capacity, specialized microdrive, identical to the cufflink he had used. Attached to it was a printout of a single encrypted file, the original, complete blueprint for the club's hidden network, now completely deciphered, ready to be used as a final nail in the coffin for the remaining suspects. It was Chloe's silent acknowledgement, a recognition of the mutual burden of truth they carried. Their paths never officially crossed again. Chloe understood that Elijah needed his peace, and Elijah knew that Chloe needed her atonement. They found a shared, unlikely connection, not in the high echelons of society, but in the trenches of moral battle. They had traded immense power for human dignity, and in the quiet of their new lives, they had found a deeper, more sustainable form of wealth, clean conscience, and genuine hope. The memory of the arrogant socialite and the invisible technician was replaced by the reality of two survivors, quietly rebuilding a world made slightly more just by their courage. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts on Chloe's final choice, and subscribe for more transformative and emotionally charged tales like this one.